Welcome back to the ENCA Corruption Scorecard. Our conversation continues with Dr. Iraj Abedian and Bernard Agalas, who just finished his term as the CEO of the IRBA, which is the Independent Regulatory Board for Auditors. I don't have much time, so let's try and see if we can go through as many of the issues as possible. Bernard Agalas, talk to me about this issue around the problem of internal auditors, right? I saw a statistic somewhere that talks about some of the heads of the internal audit units at companies. Many of them, about 25%, are sort of have links previously to the big four auditing firms, and that's proving to be a bit of a problem.
So this is where the problem with internal auditors is not isolated to internal auditors as one of the role players in the financial reporting chain. It applies to everybody in the financial reporting chain. Whether the internal auditors come from the audit firms, there's an independence problem. If an audit committee member or a board member comes from the audit firm, there's an independence problem. So while we talked about independence when we implemented mandatory audit firm rotation about 2-3 years ago, the bottom line was, and the root cause had been the independence of these role players. And certainly there will be a problem if anybody in the financial reporting chain does not exercise the necessary skepticism when there's conflicts of interest, or if they are not independent, because independence has to form the cornerstone of trust that is built with those that the auditors report to. And I do believe that we can't only look at one of the role players, we have to look at all of them. And that is why one of the recommendations from the IRBA had been for the minister to consider implementing comprehensive regulation, which is having somebody that has to have oversight over the whole financial reporting chain and not just the auditors. So certainly I do believe that if there's any problems with conflicts, then there will be problems picked up in the organizations. I think we saw that in Steino, we saw that in Tongaat. Yeah. There has to be independence from all of these role players.
So let me then turn to the big issue, the big talking point around the auditing profession amendment bill, which is now before the NCOP and subject to public hearings, etc., etc. On paper, Iraj Abedian, it looks like a strong piece of legislation, powers of search and seizure, powers to enter premises and subpoena documents for the regulator. Will this help us in any way, these powers?
Only partially. Unless you break up the existing global oligopoly of these four big, and no amount of legislation is going to deal with the fact that these structures are set up not to be doing assurance alone. So we have to have legislation. That's important. We need to have IRBA, which are not the products of these big four. And that's another problem. So IRBA has to be capacitated. You see, legislation, Tulis, is as good as the capacity of those who exercise implementation and oversight. So if you have a good legislation but a weak and useless IRBA, you're not going to get effect from it. At the same time, unless you break the structure of these big four and there is stronghold on the economy, legislation is not going to solve that problem.
Yeah, and that comes back to that issue around the audit firm rotation. Part of it, there's a target that by 2023 it should be happening. The latest statistic showing that about 25% of the firms in the JSE have sort of achieved that. Let me throw this question to you, Bernard Agalas. You were part of championing some of the legislative change. Well, it seems, it's moving at snail's pace through the corridors of Parliament, but it seems it's headed in the direction you wanted. Will this help us in any way?
I think, Tulis, it will certainly help when it comes to independence and to address some of the issues that Iraj had referred to. And let me also just add to my support to what Iraj is saying about strengthening the regulator and regulatory capacity. It is absolutely crucial that if we want to implement these changes, you need strongly capacitated regulator that has not only the financial resources but also the means to employ the right people and the right number of people to implement these changes. At the moment, Iraj refers to the strength of the big four firms, and that cannot be denied. The reason that the Auditing Profession Act amendments are moving at a snail's pace is because while the Standing Committee on Finance really tried their utmost to fast-track that piece of legislation following the various audit failures, there has been resistance from the profession. And what we have to always be careful of is that we don't get into a situation where you have regulatory capture. And that happens when the regulators try to strengthen their powers, like what the Audit Profession Amendments Act is trying to do, strengthen their powers, simplify their processes, but continuously get resisted by those that are being regulated.
Yeah.
And therefore, whatever Parliament does, they have to always be careful that there is no regulatory capture and help and support the regulators and those institutions to capacity themselves and become stronger.
Bernard Agalas, thank you so much. I've got to thank you for your time. And Dr. Iraj Abedian, thank you for your time here on the ENCA Corruption Scorecard, weighing in on the issue of auditors and their role in our fight against fraud and corruption. Well, South Africans are not mincing their words on the issues that we've put to you. We asked how the country should deal with dodgy auditors. Let's take a look now, and Michael Marillier is coming through. I see, Michael, you're still carrying the bucket. I thought we were done with the bucket. We've made the point we wanted to make about scooping water with a leaking bucket.
Well, we have a leak problem, Tullis. Money leaking out of state-owned entities, leaking out of big firms, all apparently because the number crunchers are allowing it to leak. So we asked South Africans, what's the best solution? How do we plug all of those leaks? So let's bring up the results of our poll. We posted this on the website about 2 hours ago, Tullis, and we asked, how do we actually deal with the guilty parties when it comes to auditing scandals? And I'm just going to move back a little bit. Jail time for individuals, that's the most popular option. 82% of viewers saying they want to see auditors behind bars. Ban the guilty individuals, so in other words, stop them from actually operating in the industry, 7%. And this was quite interesting. I was quite surprised by this number, about 11% saying we need to scrap the firm's contracts altogether. In other words, take them out of business.
I actually would have thought that would be much higher. I agree with you. It is a surprising figure. But consistently, people want to see people going to jail. And as you were reporting a bit earlier on, at the very least, we have some progress in terms of people at least being charged in some of these cases. Not enough?
Yeah, well, we'll have to see. As the regulator has said, and as Dr. Abedian has said, these things do take time, but at the same time, we need consequences. We need these leaks to be plugged.
Absolutely. Michael, thank you for that. And that is your corruption scorecard for this week. And, just in case you're wondering, what you've been watching in the last hour is journalism with an agenda. And that is my agenda. Take care.